Hey, folks. I finished reading this week Camelia Elias's book. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Marseilles Tarot Towards the Art of Reading. This was recommended to me. And it's an interesting, and I mean that in a really good way. It's an interesting, I read it in one night. It was like, boom. Book on tarot. And if you ever read her blog, Tarot Reflections, you'll know what I'm talking about. She's got a very practical approach, and that's why this book was recommended to me. She's a bit braver than I am, which I admire. She doesn't mince words, and I do. As much as I try to be a practical reader, I do. But anyway, in that book is a 13 card spread that she calls the Council. It's sort of a cartomantic spread. This is a really good book. It's a quick read, really, really. It's strange, certainly by American terms, and it's a very, I am not the kind of person who says, oh, this is not necessarily a beginner's deck, or this isn't necessarily a beginner's book. I think, if you're ready for it and you dive in and it gives you what you needed, or it gives you something, then great. But this is not a book that will give you the usual introduction. And it's not a book that's going to give you card meanings in the sense of card meanings. If you haven't read this, she goes through each of the trumps and she sort of describes it in a way, and then she gives like a really quick example of a reading that she used the card. So, for example, for the charioteer or the chariot, the example reading, and they're very terse, quick readings. She says this is an example of a reading she gave for the chariot. A woman wants to know, what is my strength? 3 cards fell on the table: the Popist, Justice, and the Charioteer. And here's what she said with those 3 cards. You have a cool head that you put into the service of showing off. Why do you do that? You don't have to. Your book is the sword, and your balance can keep your driving force in check. But are you really in control? You can sit and inform yourself on anything. You can stand tall and issue laws, and you can find a cause worthy to fight for. This is a great strength to have, but make sure your truth won't run amok. Don't stumble over props. So, she gives using 3 major arcana cards, she goes for it. And she has a post on her blog about how she can read a Lenormand Grand Tableau in 1 minute and 30 seconds. I can't do a 3-card Lenormand reading in 1 minute and 30 seconds. So anyway, in this book, I copied the page out of the book just so I could write on it better and not have to hold the book open while I did this. Because I haven't tried this before, so we're going to try it out. So this is the Council, and it's meant to be a large spread that gives sort of a classic layout, the Council of 13. And it's laid out in this diamond pattern, and it's read in phases. So I'm gonna do just a sample of this to see how my impression of it goes, and to see what you all think of it. I'm using my smallest tarot deck because this is a large spread. I got today La Courte de Tarocchi that I really wanted to use for this, and it's so tall that I couldn't fit it in frame no matter how high I raised my camera. So in terms of working with questions, in her book, she talks a lot about how important questions are. And I have talked about that too. So in that sense, I feel like there's a kindred relationship there. Because I really do feel like the more a reading is more effective when I can offer more specificity. And I can't offer a lot of specificity with just a general question. So I really, really try to guide folks who I read for into asking me specific questions, so that I can give specific answers, and so this book kind of confirmed my impulse there, which was nice, because I've been feeling for a very long time how important that is. So I'm going to work with a question, and just for the sake of practice. And I'm going to say that this question is for someone who wants to start their own business, and they want to know whether it's going to be successful enough to thrive for their first year. This is based on the question that is in the book as the example reading for this, although it's slightly different. My question is a little more practical than the sample one. So the cards are laid out and read in a specific order. And I'll go through it sort of step by step. And we'll see how this goes. I am using a pip deck for this because this book is specifically geared for Marseille. And this is not a Marseille deck, of course. This is a later Italian deck. But my Marseille deck is too big as well. So I'm just going to go with this. But I think you could use this with any deck. And in fact, if this reading doesn't run too long, and one of the aims is not to run too long, then maybe I'll try it with the other... I have the Tarot of Trees, which sort of sits between Rider-Waite-Smith and a pip deck. So if this doesn't go too long, I'll try it with that one too. All right. So, again, let's just go through. So, the cards are laid out in this order. So, the first card goes in the center. Then 2 goes on the left. 3 goes on the right. 4 goes above. 5 goes below. 6 on the left. 7 on the right. 8 at the top. 9 on the bottom, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it is a very, 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 very large spread. Can we see? Yes, we can see most of it. A very, very, very large spread. So how this works. Read the cards in this order, she says. So the first the inner cross, the horizontal line first, with a focus on 2 and 3. So essentially we start with the inner cross, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You start with the 3 in the middle horizontally, and then vertically for 1 and 5. Then the outer cross, so that essentially adds 6 and 7, and then 8 and 9. Then the X with the left diagonal first, so then it goes 10, 1, 11, and then the cross 12, 1, and 13. And then she says you can do mirroring, like in Cartomantic or Lenormand sort of spread, so you could do 10, 6, and 13, 11, 7, and... No, that's 12, 7, and 11, right? So, it's, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of things, but the aim is to sort of work relatively quickly and come up with a helpful answer, based on, the lines and the attempts. So we start with 1, 2, and 3. So, just looking here, and the other thing she says is that the first card, which is always in the path of one of the crossbars that you're looking at, it always relates to the central issue. The central issue, what is the 4 of coins? That actually is a good theme for someone who's asking a question about starting their own business and being financially solvent in the first year, because the 4 of coins indicates stability, and coins, of course, can represent money and life and work. So it seems like the reading on a whole is resting on a really stable base. So now we read the first 3. We get the Ace of Cups, the 4 of coins, and the Chariot. So we say, for example, that this is, again, a stable financial state. There's sort of a new emotional feeling and a sense of the ability to pull direction. So they're maybe a little shaky emotionally, but their direction is good and their stability is good. Now we look down to 4, 1, and 5. They may be a little impulsive, but again, that impulsivity is standing on a base of stability. and they are uh, sort of in a creative state, looking within to figure out what the right thing to do is. So again, that validates the question, in a sense, because the question is, will I be financially solvent, or how financially solvent will I be in the year, this first year of starting my business? Um, they are going into a new place creatively, and they're going within to make that work, to see if that's possible. They are feeling sort of impulsive and reckless, but again, we've got this great stability. So overall, in this center cross, there's a little bit of shakiness, but there is a sense of direction and a strong inner quality that is allowing them to be self-aware. So in that sense, there's a good foundation. A really good foundation. And even with these two cards, they're not necessarily bad. There is sort of a youthful innocence about both of these two, but they are very unstable. But with all of this stability, I feel like that's a good sign. So now we look at the outer cross, which now involves this, and this, right? So 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we do have growth, creative growth, and we do have a cycle. So there is the inevitability that right now is a growth period. That's a good thing, but it's not always going to be that way. So we have to recognize as we start down this path that the creative growth is exciting and it's going to be there, but it's jobs are cyclical. There's also the Papesa, the High Priestess, and the Two of Coins. So money can grow, but it's a little bit unknown right now, how fast or how quickly, because so much of starting something new is a secret. So this outer cross sort of underscores the overall concept that while we have a good foundation, and while there's a lot of good stuff going on in the center, with these twos, we're sort of at the beginning of a journey, definitely. Things are growing creatively and financially, so there's great potential there, but there's a certain amount that's unknown and that we can't see ahead of time, and to recognize that things are going to be cyclical. So we may want to go ahead and plan accordingly. It looks like so far we are going to be financially solvent, but it's worth planning for the fact that things are going to change, and this is a very new venture, and so much is unknown. So again, we're looking good so far. So now we read the X. So we go 10, 1, and 11, and then we'll look at 12, 1, and 13. So with the Four of Swords, again, this is a good sign. We've got a really stable mental state. We probably have some good stable communication experience, and a new plan for communicating our business. So advertisement looks like it's in good shape, because we're thinking of swords in this case, at least for me right now, as an ad of some kind, or as the ability to communicate, the ability to plan and think clearly. So I would say that indicates a good marketing plan resting on their experience. In this case, I'm looking at the Four of Coins more as a stability of experience, life experience, rather than money. But again, I would say that they're probably well educated. They've probably done something related to what they're doing, even though it's going to be a new plan. Their marketing plan will probably be successful because of the experience it's resting on. We've got the Emperor, and we've got the Queen of Cups. So the Emperor is good too. The Emperor is a good sign, certainly because it, especially with this one, indicates a nice strength and rigidity, a willpower certainly, but also an ability to nurture and flow. So there's a nice balance here. We can be really strong and really rigid when we need to be. We can be very fluid and very nurturing, all again resting on this really nice central life foundation. So in that sense, things feel really good. So I would say, yes, it looks likely that because of this experience that they have, it is possible for them to be financially solvent in the first year. If they are conscious of the new energy, we've got a lot of 4s and 2s, you know what I mean? Two, we've got, 2 aces. I'm sorry, these are 4s. We got 2 aces, we've got 2 2s. So, really, really young energy, and still, though, a lot of stability, a lot of strength, a lot of direction, a little potential to be fluid, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because agility is really important in starting a business. We're crowned by a sense of the unknown, with the Popus, with the High Priestess, but that also suggests a certain amount of intuition, which makes sense resting on this experience. So that's a good sign. We have to recognize that business is cyclical like anything else, but by and large, this looks pretty successful. So that's a good demonstration, I think, of this, or I don't know if it was good for you, but it was good for me. A useful demonstration, I think, of this spread. And I kind of really like it. In fact, I think I'm going to put this up, and make it available for anyone, who wants to buy it. I'll do it relatively cheaply because I actually really like this and I think I would want to practice. Now, I did promise, if this was, how long did this take? 15 minutes. That's quick for me. Let me go ahead and try it with the Tarot of Trees, which is a little more pictorial, for anyone who resents my new love affair with pip decks. Where are you hiding? Right in front of my face. So I'm using this one primarily because it's tiny. None of my other decks I don't think will fit in frame. So this will be a little bit more useful theoretically for folks who use pictorial, representative. I'm trying to find the PC word for decks that aren't more, you know. Boy. The thing with this deck, like any glossy deck, is that it's slippery. I mean, it's sticky and slippery at the same time. But it does shuffle really well. I really like this deck a lot. Yeah, the thing for me is like finding the politically correct term for non-representational, non-scenic minors. So please pardon my... Boy. I shuffle fine when I'm not videotaping myself. Get a camera on me and I cannot shuffle to save my life. It also doesn't help that I'm walking and chewing gum, basically. You know what's weird about this deck is I don't read reversals, but every time I pick it up, cards are reversed. So I think this deck wants to be read with reversals, although I probably won't think of them that way. Let's come up with a question for this reading. Let's say, how can I improve this young relationship? So someone has asked about the beginning of a relationship that they really want to make work, but it's faltering in its early days. If this were a friend, of course, and I got that question, I'd say, look, you're 3 months in and it's not working out. That's not necessarily a good sign, but that's just my fatalistic viewpoint. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I have the whole deck upside down? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right. Now, if you do read reversals, I just find that I don't need them anymore. I just kind of go with what the reading suggests to me. But one of the things that I say time and time again, can we see all of this? Yes, and the glare's not bad. In fact, I can probably lower this a skosh. Pardon the shakiness. So that you can see them a little bit better. And seeing is believing. So, again, it's a big spread no matter what deck you use, but It certainly works well with a small deck like this. What can I do to improve the relationship in its early days? So again, I'm going to look at the center card for a theme. We've got the Knight of Pentacles. Again, that seems to validate the question. I have someone here who's a very practical seeker. So they have a practical approach to their love life, which I think is appropriate. Oops, this is going to fall. Let me just... Sorry. They have a practical approach to their relationships. They're not necessarily an overly romantic type. So again, we're going to read the inner cross. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 4, 5. So we start there. We have the Empress, the Knight of Pentacles, and the Knight of Cups. So even though we start centrally with someone who's very practical, we do have someone who's a bit more of a romantic, and someone who's a fan of a nurturer. So they're probably very inwardly practical, but outwardly a caretaker, and outwardly a bit of a romantic, a bit of a wanderer. The Knight of Cups to me is always a bit of a wanderer. A romantic wanderer. So they're naturally probably given a bit to God. They're probably given a bit to roaming. So I think that's interesting. Again, both of these cards came up reversed, so if I wanted to explore that, I could say that it probably underscores their practical thing, and that starting here is that they have to sort of focus on this practicality. They can't be an over caretaker or an over wanderer. They can't be overly romantic. The situation is going to require a certain amount of practicality, underscored by the Ace of Pentacles below, and the Six of Cups above. So we need a new level of practicality and a new ability to learn from our past. So again, I'm sort of going in a different direction from the last reading, where I was working with sort of a numerological system. Here I'm going with a more Rider-Waite-Smith system. So I'm looking at Six of Cups as memory rather than beauty. So looking at their past and learning for a more practical starting point. So they can't be the loving nurturer that they usually are. They have to have a more practical output or experience, and look at their past, learn from those mistakes, be more practical than romantic. So now I look at the outer cards. I look at the 6 and the 7 and the 8 and the 9. I've got the Star and the 9 of Cups. So on the outset, there's going to be a central need to be very practical, but I can still be more wishful. So the outside lines here suggest being optimistic, but grounded in reality, right? So we've got a very realistic core here, but the 9 of Cups and the Star certainly suggest a more hopeful, wishful outlook. So they can't throw away their optimism completely, but it needs to be balanced with practicality at its core. Looking at the outside, very interesting. We have the High Priestess at the top again. We had the High Priestess at the top in the last reading, the Papist. This suggests a great deal of intuition. So they're going to have to call on that intuitive experience in order to do this. They're also going to have to be able to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. It's really important not to get distracted by our optimistic hopes and by our deep wants. We have to know the reality. We have to look deeper. We have to look into the core of the situation, and really, really work hard not to be influenced by our fantasies. So optimistic yet intuitive, there's a real strong need for balance overall here, again, with the central, very practical core. So now we read the X. So we have the Emperor, again, very interesting, the Knight, and then the 5 of Pentacles. So there's a certain amount balanced here with the Empress reversed. So very interesting that the Emperor is going to call on us, again, if we look at this line, not to be super nurturing, but to be a bit more of a strong presence, and also to be able to kind of realize when it's time to let go of something in life. We're going to have to exercise, this is the Page of Swords and the 8 of Wands. We're going to have to exercise a bit more of an intellectual approach, which we may not be sure how to do because that's new to us. we are going to have to be a bit more thoughtful, and we're going to have to be a bit more active than maybe we're given to, because most of the non-major cards so far are Earth. So we've got Pentacles, Pentacles, Water, Water. These are the first swords. This is the first fire and air that we have so far. So again, I can look at these outside sort of parentheses, Emperor, Star, and Wands. So I can be strong, I can be wishful, and I can be active. I can be sort of curiously intellectual, hopeful, but also know when it's time to walk, to sort of give up on something. So overall, I think that it does look like it's possible to help the relationship, remembering that a relationship is two people, not one. It definitely requires a practical core, not sort of being the overwaterer, overfeeder of the relationship, learning from our past mistakes and taking a new practical track, using our intuition, being optimistic, recognizing things as they really are, be willing to go deeper and be willing to look at the hard things, being strong, being, you know, a leader, knowing when it's time to walk away, being more thoughtful and being more active than we have been in the past. So again, I think a really practical approach. So just after these two practice readings, I feel really, and with two sort of non, you know, imaginary questions, I'm really liking this spread a lot. And I kept this under 30 minutes. Can you believe it? This is the shortest video I've made in ages. So I hope you like this. If you are curious about reading where this came from, this is the Marseilles Tarot Towards the Art of Reading by Camelia Elias. And I'll put a link to her blog, which is far more famous than my channel, you know. But if you haven't heard of her by some off chance, and you're late to the party like me, check her blog out. She writes about cartomancy, she writes about Lenormand, she writes about tarot, Marseilles Tarot, modern tarot. She's got an incredibly eclectic style, and just a great, you know, I think a great kind of sense of humor. So before this reaches 30 minutes, I'm going to end it here. Have a great weekend.